Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura on this edition of Politicking. Welcome to Politicking. I'm Larry King. Jesse Ventura, the former independent governor of Minnesota, former Navy SEAL, former pro wrestler, and New York Times best-selling author. His newest book is entitled Shit Politicians Say. Jesse joins me from Minneapolis. We'll talk about your new book shortly. It's going to make a lot of people laugh. Some people get mad. Even Ben Franklin's in this book. But first, let's talk about some current politics. What do you make of Trump's pick of Mike Pence?
Well, Larry, to me it's a step that he obviously wants to go back and unify the old Republican guard, I guess. And I kind of don't like that out of him. I personally wish he would have picked that general that he was talking about, another guy who had nothing to do with politics. And I think that would have been, truthfully, a stronger pick for him to keep the, quote, revolution he's caused in the Republican Party going. But maybe he felt, I don't know, I'm not a Republican, maybe he felt that he needed to solidify the party to bring the old guard hopefully back on board.
Is it true, Jesse,
I don't think it's...
Did you say that if Trump picks a status quo Republican, don't be surprised if he's assassinated?
Oh, we were having a discussion, having fun, and I said, "This is I've spent about 3 or 4 years or more studying many conspiracy theories now in my life, and this is a perfect, if you take it as a scenario. If he picks a guy that the old guard wants, well, then that guy's only a heartbeat away. Then you got Donald Trump, who said all these hugely provocative things against the Mexicans and against Muslims." So out of the Mexican or Muslim, you've got your Lee Harvey Oswald waiting in the wings. The guy to blame it on. No, the guy to blame it on. I mean, it's a perfect scenario. If I were writing a screenplay or something, it would be outstanding for a screenplay because it's setting up beautifully. You take out that guy, your guy's a heartbeat away, and everything's back to normal then, right, Larry?
So Mike Pence fits that bill.
I think he would, because he's getting rave reviews from the old status quo of the Republicans, who were all part of the dump Trump movement. And now apparently, if he brings this guy on board, I guess they'll accept Donald for a while.
Earlier this year, Jesse, you said you love what Trump was doing because he's completely putting the Republican Party in disarray. How would you describe the current state of the GOP?
Well, they're trying to resurrect and get behind Trump. He did do it, just as Bernie did it to the Democrats. I said the same thing there. I said, I love what Bernie's doing to the Democrats. He's breaking them up. For me, Larry, it all comes down to getting more in. And let me be blunt here. Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, he's an alternative out there. And I say right now, he belongs in the debates. Because you got two candidates here, their negatives are through the roof. There has never been two candidates so disliked as Hillary and Donald Trump. That don't the people finally, we haven't heard a third voice since Ross Perot in '92. Shouldn't Gary Johnson be allowed to get up there to where people can say, I don't even like these two, I'm going to vote for this guy? And then what could happen? You want to talk about a conspiracy situation? Think of this. If Johnson won his home state of New Mexico and maybe a couple others, if he got fortunate to do that, and if Hillary and Donald can't reach that magic, whatever it is, 270 mark of the Electoral College, we wouldn't have a president then, would we? Then maybe 2016 would be the catalyst to get rid of the Electoral College, which I've been advocating for decades. How can you get the most votes and lose, i.e. what happened to Al Gore against George Bush in 2000. He got 500,000 more votes and lost. No other office allows that except president. So maybe that's the real good that can come out of this race.
Who should Hillary pick as her running mate, do you think?
I don't know. Got me. I mean, if she wants to go progressive and go all women and a very intelligent, take Elizabeth Warren. But, you know, maybe Elizabeth Warren would overshadow her. That also comes into play. You know, you don't want a VP that's going to overshadow the main person. You know, I don't think that would work well. Well, because then people would say, why isn't it that person? You know, you don't want a VP that's going to overshadow the president. You know, at least I wouldn't think that would be good tactical move. But then what do I know, Larry? I only beat both parties, and I did it within. See, here I'm your prime example, Larry. I was polling 10% at Labor Day, and in 2 months I was allowed to debate. I defeated the Democrats and Republicans. I was at 10%. They're going to require the candidate to be at 15. I think that's highly unfair because I proved it could be done, and it could be done in a mere 2 months, and I didn't spend any money to do it. I simply was allowed to debate. So let me throw this out, Larry, right with you. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. Don't be cowards. You want to be the head of the military, you want to be the commander-in-chief, then have enough courage to allow Gary Johnson in the debates.
You make a
How's
strong...
that, Larry?
I've always favored that. I don't know why the two-party system isn't in the Constitution. Why can't these candidates get a shot? Why can't the public... I know Gary Johnson very well. He deserves the attention. He deserves the floor.
Exactly, and we deserve it as citizens to have that opportunity. We should not be a two-party dictatorship, which is exactly what we've been. And Ralph Nader, I took that from him. That was a great set of words Ralph said, the two-party dictatorship. And that's what we're operating under. This is the year, Larry. This is the year with these two candidates with negatives. This is the year, if it were allowed, if people demanded a third person in those debates, you could see the rise of a third party in America.
Did you have some affinity for Bernie Sanders?
Well, you know, I did. I went down, actually, last summer to see if I could endorse Bernie. And I'll tell you, Larry, he cold-shouldered me.
Really?
He barely, I got 1 minute from him in the hallway. He wouldn't even meet with me. And I asked him point blank in that minute, because I knew I didn't have much time apparently with him. He was right in Minneapolis. And I said, Senator, if you lose the nomination in the Democratic Party, will you run as an independent, or will you support an independent movement to keep this revolution going? He looked me in the eye and says, no, I will support the Democrat. It was at that point I said, Bernie Sanders is not an independent anymore. He's a Democrat. So I really wish he'd quit calling himself an independent. He's not. He's a Democrat. I knew this last summer. I walked away then going, oh boy, the whole movement's dead the minute Hillary wins because of the superdelegates. See, it was fixed. I knew Bernie couldn't win because of these, quote, superdelegates. There's the fix on the Democratic side. And so last year I knew Bernie wasn't, you know, it was all over the movement with him unless people shift to Gary Johnson. And that's what I'm trying to do now, get them to do that. The Bernie Sanders people need to go to Governor Johnson and keep it moving.
What do you make, Governor, of all the turmoil going on, the killing of police officers killing seemingly innocent people, every day a new story? Are you concerned?
Larry, very. I lived through the 60s. I'm sitting here going, how can I be getting deja vu? I'm living it again. 50 years later, I have to live the 60s all over again. Well, I hope the rest of the 60s holds true. I hope we start protesting the wars and get our military out of the Middle East, just like what happened in the 60s to get us out of Vietnam. Now, having said that, look, there's some root causes at work here. Number one is racism. You can't deny it. Statistically, it shows it's happening. In Minnesota in 2001, we did a study on arrests with 60-some police through Minnesota, police forces. Clearly, it came back, black men are pulled over way more than white men are. Black men are patted down way more than white men are. But guess what the shocker was? White men have contraband way more than black men do. Yeah. That's what we found in our 2001 study. Now, The other root cause we should do, Larry, end the war on drugs. That's helping this, because that's what's militarized our police. That's what make it where police violate the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, they knock down doors, and they come in shooting. It's this attitude of shoot first, ask questions later, that is all stemmed from the failed war on drugs. Let's end the war on drugs. That will end the militarization of our police forces if we want to end it. And I had this backed up completely by, guess who? A 10 or 12 year, I can't remember, Baltimore police officer. Agreed with me 100%. The war on drugs is a root cause of what you're seeing today with this problem on the streets between the people and the police.
In fact, the war on drugs is a failure, isn't it?
Totally. My mother, before she died, Larry, she's a World War II veteran. How many people can say their mom's a World War II veteran? I could. My mom was a nurse in North Africa. She told me before she passed on, she said the war on drugs is identical to the prohibition of alcohol, which she lived through. She said all you're doing is creating violence and you're putting criminals in rich and powerful positions. You're making them rich and powerful. I can't argue with my mom. She's completely correct on that.
We're going to talk about your book in the next segment. Do you worry for your country?
Yeah, I really do. I hate to say it, Larry, but I'm 65 now. By the way, I qualified for Medicare. That's huge, right? That's what we all live our life to do. But it bothers me because in my 65 years, this is the first time in my life that I felt our best years may not be in front of us. They may be behind us. And that, to me, is a scary thought. And I can only blame it on the Democrats and Republicans because they've been in charge for the last 150 years of that time.
Our guest is Jesse Ventura. His newest book is Politicians Say. And we'll have more with the former governor right after the break.
I'm Tom Hartman, and I'll give you what the mainstream media can't, the big picture.
There's been no charges filed in
Preserve, protect, and defend. Political revolution. And when you question more, you find what you're looking for.
This is the legislative branch of the party.
We'll go deeper, investigate, and debate, all so you can get the big picture.
With Jesse Ventura on this edition of Politicking, the former governor of Minnesota, former Navy SEAL and pro wrestler, actor and best-selling author. His newest book, Politicians Say, is out now and available everywhere. How did this book come about?
Well, Tony Lyons, my publisher at Skyhorse, I love him. He's got courage. He publishes me. Nobody else will. Anyway, Tony and I brainstormed this a couple years ago, just watching what was developing. And then, of course, we said, if we do this book, we'll need about a year to do the research, to dig it up. Let's do it right, which I think we did. And I said, and then we felt what would be the best time to release it. And of course, July of 2016 just came. There it was. I mean, the two conventions, that's when everybody will be looking at politics. Let's release the book then, because it's a book, Larry, that's going to get every emotion when you read some of these quotes. You're going to laugh.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to cry. You're going to be dumbfounded. You're going to get angry. And then in the end, I hope what you get out of it is you're going to say, you know what? These leaders of ours, they're just that. They're just people. They're no smarter or no dumber than anybody else, really.
In fact, we've always had it, haven't we? There's nothing new. Yeah.
Oh, hey, Larry, that part was what really got me. We went back all the way to the Founding Fathers, and I can't believe some of the quotes they said about each other. John Adams had nothing good to say about George Washington and him and Tom Jefferson. Oh, boy. But yet, here's what I got out of it. These guys, like, hated each other. They weren't singing Kumbaya at the fire, and yet they still managed to put together this document, this Constitution, this Bill of Rights. The fabric of our nation, even with all their differences, they put the country first. I can't say that about the Democrats and Republicans because they allow the government to get shut down, which shows they put their parties before the government and before the country. But these guys that formed our country, all the differences they had, they set them aside to still form this great nation of ours, Larry.
In your book's introduction, you have a 2013 quote from Secretary of State John Kerry, which says, "In America, you have a right to be stupid if you want to be." Is that a good idea?
Well, it's the truth. I've said that many times, Larry. I've said it, I think, before John Kerry. I said, if you live in freedom, you have to understand freedom also is the freedom to be stupid.
Correct.
There's a yin and a yang always. And if you're going to live under the cloak of freedom, then you have to understand freedom also means the freedom to be stupid, as much as we dislike it.
Chapter 1 of this book has quotes from U.S. founding fathers. You call them smart, well-educated guys, unlike a lot of the morons we have running the game now. You also add that they lived in a time when a lot of their shit could be kept private. Who was your favorite founding father?
You know, I always liked Ben Franklin a lot because of the quote that he said, "For those of you that will give up your liberty for freedom shall have, or your liberty for security, excuse me. For those that give up their liberty for security will have and deserve neither." And to me, that's a quote that has resonated with me my whole life, telling people, if you look to the government to protect you, the only way the government can protect you is by taking your freedom. And people don't wake up to that fact that freedom is security, and we dare not give it up, and we seem so willing to do so.
Why does
give up our rights, give up the Bill of Rights.
Why does it appear that in selecting our leaders, we have gotten less than we had 200 years ago? How do you explain that?
I think that's hard to explain, I guess. I just don't think we're getting the quality individuals necessarily, because here's why. Our government's been taken over now and controlled by corporate money. And so he who's got the money controls the government. And I believe that that's what's happened in the United States, that fascism's real here. And the definition of it, Larry, is when corporations and organized religion take over the government. And I think we're there. We've been there for a long time, ever since the Supreme Court said that a corporation has the same rights as me. And my point there is then, okay, if a corporation has the same rights I do, well, then let the corporation pay taxes at my level. If we're equal, then corporations should have to pay the same as I do. Oh, well, no, they don't want any part of that. They want all the equality they can get, but they want lower taxes than what I pay. Well, how does it work that way if they're demanding to be treated equally to me? And so that's what worries me, is the money and the corporations have taken over all of these two political parties completely. When they have their two conventions this month, you'll see the same, you know, call them what they may, lobbyists, but I call them bribers. The same bribers will be at both conventions dueling out the bribery money, and in which controlling our government by paying off our politicians. This is the month for it. It's convention time.
Your book
it's
is
bribery month.
Your book is organized by issues. You have stupid shit about global warming, healthcare, same-sex marriage, women. There are chapters specifically devoted to shit Democrats say, shit Republicans say. Yet, George W. Bush and his administration and Sarah Palin get their own chapters. Do they say the most stupid things?
Yeah, really it came down to that. We had to give them their own chapters. We couldn't fit them. They had so much. We couldn't fit them anywhere else other than give them their own chapters. And Larry, let me throw this in. When Tony and I talked about this over a year ago, I told him right then, Tony, the last chapter's got to be me. I said, to be fair in the book, I want the last chapter to be all the bunch of quotes that I said, so we threw them in at the end of the book too. So I didn't leave myself out. My quotes are there for everybody to read too.
Give me one or two.
Well, one of my favorites is my Playboy one, where I said that all fat people tell you they have gland trouble. Well, I said the only gland trouble they have is saliva gland trouble. I said, and I stand by that, Larry. Obesity's something you can control. Obesity's in your hands if you have the self-control to eat correctly and exercise. You won't be fat. So there's no excuse for it. And, you know, I made fun of them, and they got mad at me because I guess, you know, one thing I learned getting elected, you're not allowed to make fun of nobody. And in fact, I changed all my jokes to be Slovak jokes because I'm Slovakian. So that's the only way you can survive in that arena. The other thing, Larry, I want to point out, today's people are going to have it even worse with the media and the technology and the social media we have today. Every elected official has to live now with this. Anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of public opinion.
Which phase of your incredible life was your favorite? Navy SEAL, pro wrestler, actor, governor?
Well, I got to give you the political answer, Larry. All of them at the time I was doing them, because they were all at different phases of this great thing we call life. And at the point where I was in the Navy, the point where I was doing my wrestling career, the point where I entered politics, the point where I started writing books, the point where I did movies, they were all my favorite at the time I was doing them. Because, Larry, two things about me. If you read about Che Guevara and me, we're a lot alike. We have wanderlust. I have a hard time sticking to one job. I respect people that can do one job their whole life. I get bored. I can't hold a job. 4 years is about the limit that I do a job at any time. And then I move on because, Larry, I don't want to get to the end of this great life and say woulda, coulda, shoulda. I want to try to do everything I can possibly do. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've dove 200 and some feet under the water. I've been governor of Minnesota. I've broadcasted NFL football. I don't want to end it there. I barely have been on Medicare right now. There's a lot more to do.
You're an infant Medicare patient. All right, Jesse, we'll pin you down. Who will be the next president of the United States?
Larry, I don't know. You know, I'm voting proudly for Governor Johnson. I hope people will stand up with me and demand he be put into the debates so he can play on a level playing field. As far as the other two go, your guess is as good as mine. This political year is truly the year of nobody can predict anything, because there isn't a pundit out there, Larry, that at the start of this whole thing said that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton would end up going head-to-head between the two major parties. So I'd like to be able to tell you, Larry, but you can't pin me down because I don't damn know.
Trump
you know I'd tell you if I could.
Trump seems to worry people more. Do you understand that?
Well, I think that the mainstream media and people that's what they're trying to portray him.
Right.
I believe the opponents want you to believe that so that they can win the election.
But they're basing it on what he says, aren't they?
Well, you know, Donald said a lot of things that I wouldn't have said. But remember, I was Donald before there was Donald. You know, if anybody knows what it's like to speak from the heart and speak your own mind, it's me. And people seem to crave that. They seem to crave. And then there's a trust factor. Let's face it. It's clear now nobody trusts Hillary. You know, with all the revelations, whether good, bad, or should they have been done, I don't know. To me, I've always posed this. I wish they'd do as complete an investigation to the trumped-up Iraq war as what they've done for emails and what they've done for Benghazi. How about the same type of investigation of what led us into this war that has overturned stability in the entire Middle East?
Do you still divide your time between Minnesota and Mexico?
I did for 10 years, but this winter I did not go to Mexico. I had things that happened. I was given the opportunity to go to Moscow, Russia. I took it because I had never been there before. I got the opportunity to meet President Putin, which I couldn't have done had I not gone there. And then I had a bunch of other things happen in my life that kept me in the United States. But I'm hoping shortly thereof I can get my sanity back and get out of this country for a while, because I call it flushing out my brain when I leave the United States
what did you
and
think?
Go down to the deep Mexico.
What did you think of Moscow and Mr. Putin?
Well, I'll tell you this, Larry, I didn't run for president, but I want this to be now my legacy from this day forward. I'm hoping my negotiations conclude positively, because I want the remainder of my life. This is how it affected me going to Moscow, because both of my parents fought in World War II, and my father had Russian friends he met in Berlin who were my dad's allies. And yet before the last person of World War II was even dead, Russia was our enemy. And that has bothered me my entire life. So I want to finish my life trying to bridge whatever I can do to bridge a gap between the United States and Russia. I want us to become friends. I've lived through the Cold War. I now visited Moscow and I met the people of Russia, and I want to be their friend, not their enemy. So whatever I'm capable of doing from this day forward to help bridge the gap between the United States and Russia, I want to be prepared to do that, what little I can do, and that's what I want my end legacy to try to be.
Jesse, always good seeing you. Be well.
You too, Larry. It's always a pleasure. And by the way, Larry, I'm doing something today that I don't think Larry King could ever have done.
What's that?
No offense now, Larry, but I'm celebrating my 41st wedding anniversary.
Goodbye, Jesse.
Bye, Larry.
Jesse Ventura, his latest book, Politicians Say, the funniest, dumbest, most outrageous things ever uttered by our leaders. It's out now and available everywhere. Thanks for joining me on this edition of Politicking. Remember, you can join the conversation on my Facebook page. You can check out the Politicking blog on our homepage, or tweet me at King's Things. And don't forget, use the Politicking hashtag. And that's all for this edition of Politicking.